All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back, everyone. Don't forget to please go and sign my online edition. Online petition at www.stopebolapetition.com. What I'm trying to do is stop people from coming into Canada from any of the African hotspots where Ebola is, or it is a possibility, but hasn't been yet diagnosed. And I'm talking about Senegal, I'm talking about Guyana, Sierra Leone. We've got to do something about this. And as Doug Rocky said in the previous segment, we have to quarantine these people over there past the quarantine period to make sure that once they leave that quarantined area, they pose no longer a health threat. Because once we let them on the aircraft and they're on their way in, this is where the danger is. So please go to www.stopebolapetition.com. Everyone who signs has their petition go to the Prime Minister of Canada, goes to the Public Safety Minister, as well as members of Parliament. Once again, www.stopebolapetition.com. My guest this hour is a good friend. Richard P. Jackson is his name, and he is an internationally known expert in spiritual matters and healing. And he has served as a teacher, practitioner, and consultant for nearly 3 decades with unparalleled success. His mission is to share knowledge, compassion, and alternatives to life's challenges. And we all know that there are many of those, don't we, Exo Nation? Let me see. To shed light on what is hidden in the darkness, innuendo, and dogma is the basis for his work. Richard uses his skills as well as gifts, experience, compassion, and guidance to strengthen the largest and most defining areas of our lives, our spiritual nature and journey. His website is www.richardpjackson.com. And Richard, welcome back to the X Zone, my friend.
Always feels like home. Thanks, Rob.
Let me see. You're a very busy man. What have you been up to since you and I last talked?
Well, I started mentioning to you I had been a long-time sufferer of Lyme disease, and I know that's come up on your show a number of times.
Yep.
I had many co-infections and lucked out with every doctor. I mean, I literally came back from the dead, but I didn't know my blood went sour. I just wasn't getting it done. And a little miracle going to the right doctor, the right blood test, and a little bit of infusion of basically gamma globulin. And I just got 20 years back, and I'm running around writing books, trying to do TV shows, doing. I feel like a kid again.
Wow, that is fantastic. I'm so happy to hear that, Richard, because I remember the days when you were not feeling that well, and I'm just so happy that you're getting back to the Richard P. Jackson that you deserve to be. Congratulations, buddy.
Thanks, Rob. And it does bring up something for our listeners. Mm-hmm. And I don't push it, as you know, but it's often been where we go and where we often talk, is the fact that I am somebody who, before a lot of this stuff was popular, worked with Bishop McKenna,
yes,
worked with Buddhists, worked with Jews. I actually was the son of Ed Warren that he never had. I have all his artwork. It's about 2 feet from my feet right now. And on it says, to my real son, Richard. He's the focus of the movie The Conjuring.
Yes.
So, I started out my spiritual journey by being a scared young guy with a daughter, wondering, how the heck do I protect her? What is this going on in this house I moved? And I started working with, the Catholic Church, rabbis, the Warrens. That's where my spiritual journey began. It wasn't out of want or desire. It was out of necessity. And I'm noticing what has happened. Our dream, including Ed, was always to have so much of this accepted and so much of this displayed and known to people. That has turned into, for me, a nightmare, because I think it's getting too much attention, and I think people get hurt, And the lead into that was one of the major effects of spirits around, even if they're not harmful or evil, which we don't always know right away by any stretch. One of the harmful effects is what it takes out of our health.
I hear you.
They don't have any energy, and even if we're projecting a spirit out of our own body called a thought form, it still comes from our energy. And most psychics and people who are really dedicated to this work find themselves with severe health problems in not too many years down the road.
Richard, you and I have to take a commercial break. Always great talking to you, my friend. And once again, I'm so happy to hear that your health is on the mend. You've done a lot of great work over the years, and we need you out there, Richard. Stand by, my friend. You and I will be back on the other side of this short break. Exonation, Richard P. Jackson is my special guest this hour. His website is www.richardpjackson.com. And Richard and I will be back on the other side of this 2-minute commercial break as the X-Zone continues. We're right here, live and around the world, on the X-Zone Broadcast Network and our fine family of broadcast affiliates and satellite programming providers. My name is Rob McConnell. I'll be back with Richard Jackson on the other side of this break. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell. My special guest this hour is Richard P. Jackson, www.richardpjackson.com. Richard, in your opinion, what is the reason for so many shows and movies concerning the occult these days?
I believe that part of it is simply there's so many stations that are competing. It's no longer 5 or 10. You know, we know it's in the hundreds, and in terms of the internet, in the thousands. They need material, and the material they get, if they do a Jacques Cousteau special, for example, as an iconic, documentary,
yes,
it costs $2, $3, $4, $5 million.
Yeah.
But to get a couple kids who go through a haunted area is more like $12, $15, $20,000. That's why you're seeing it. They're cheap to make, and people are becoming very addicted to seeing this stuff. It becomes seductive, and they want more and more and more.
But you know what, my friend? It's crap.
No kidding.
It's crap. And, I feel so sorry for anyone who takes these hacker shows seriously. I really feel sorry for them, and I think that the networks and stations who air this crap should be held accountable. It's just sheer crap.
I think one of the things, and you and I are rarely in disagreement,
Yeah.
We've always spoken,
Yeah.
certainly not on this, but I think one of the things is that sometimes bad things have to get to a point where all of a sudden, intelligence and wisdom prevails, and things that we wouldn't really learn until all of a sudden people realize, what a spike in kid suicide, what a spike in schizophrenia, what's causing this? I believe at least a little of it is the amount of these shows, because of the amount of people who've come to me with their kids in danger or in hospitals or being diagnosed. It's actually something that happened once or twice in 20 years and happens about 5 to 10 times a month now.
Wow.
That's a lot for me, because I'm not trying to be in that field. And the other reason that I think it's out there is people feel very disempowered. It's not the same world for the time being. We can all have opportunities, but it's not exactly the same. And I think a lot of it is we're lazy. We're not as hardworking, and some things are a little stacked against us, like the drift of money to always up, not down to the middle or down to the bottom. So people need to feel they have some power, some magic, something they know that makes them special. So where do they turn? Either religion or the occult or drugs.
Let me ask you this, Richard. How dangerous is it for someone who tinkers with the paranormal if they don't know what they're doing? How dangerous is it?
It's a little less dangerous than trying to make nitroglycerin.
So it has no point.
It really is dangerous. And the danger comes from people don't. It's like if if you're playing with electricity and you hit something damp, you get a shock, and you all of a sudden jump back and realize you were doing something wrong. But this stuff, including a lot of these, I'm calling them kids, but people of all ages who are going into these places and I can protect you. Why are they not being bothered? I believe that when it's hype, it's hype.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's not hype and there are spirits or energies present, they want these people to get people to invite things and say things like, gee, I want to witness something. I want to see something. So they're not being bothered. They will be in a few years. Some of these people will have things in their lives. Should they not turn to prayer and start getting very careful, I don't want to, I know I'm going to hear some stories about people who used to do this work
mm-hmm.
and whose health and lives have gone to a really tough place. You can guarantee it. It's almost like clockwork. I'd say about 50% of the people who play with this as a
mm-hmm.
hobby wind up their whole lives are diverted, and they are really challenged in the future that isn't that far down the road.
So let me ask you, Rich, what are some of the most common myths that are given by people who pose as quasi-experts on spirituality?
Don't worry. I know how to protect you. Good luck. That would be one. The other is, well, I know things like Ouija boards can be dangerous, but I know how to use them properly. That's another myth. Another myth is, well, it's only a human spirit. It's not like it's a demon or anything. A human spirit can be very vicious too, and sometimes you don't know the difference. Some of my worst cases started out as little children asking to be, can I just be in your attic? My family's gone. I just used to live here. And they never bothered to ask, are you a child or are you something else? Would you, love God? Would you drink up the light of God?
Mm-hmm.
And there's been some tricks with this and some families that have wound up, quite frankly, maybe because of where I worked, I got some of the tough cases. But some of these families wound up with some suicide and deaths that were rather quick and instant once things got out of hand. There's no spirit that's safe to play with. They're not toys. And that's basically, answering that question anyway.
You and I were talking before we went on air about The Conjuring because of your connection with Ed Warren. Is that a typical case that you have worked on where the activity is so violent and the family is put through living hell?
Yes, but it's usually something that might be spread out over 6 months or 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like, there might be a bad night. Have I been in a situation where all of a sudden dishes flew and there's bangings on the wall and somebody gets pushed? Yes. In my own house, which is where I called them because I had my own problem, we saw something that to this day, including your show that I try to listen to, I have never heard the phenomenon that happened in my house, and I'd like to share it.
Please.
It's something that, while we never use the word, let me just throw the word out there, which I don't believe really exists, except as an explanation, and the word is ectoplasm. I watched with I think there were about 16 people in the house, Warren's investigators and my family together, and we watched this green glowing gel about the size of maybe 2 pieces of plywood that were going in and out of closets and in between walls, that it was sometimes on 2 sides of the room. It was like this oozing light that even though the boards between the walls, because it's a really old farmhouse,
mm-hmm.
were thick tongue and groove 5-quarter pine, it was as if there was a space and the light was still coming through. And people were going, oh my God. And I was going, wow. Everyone was asleep in about 15 seconds. I lasted about 6 seconds and said, I'm not going to sleep. Next thing I knew, it was morning. It was the family that had died, and this is historically true, we found out, that had died of typhoid and were coming to us, and to me in particular, because they saw me as the way out, because they were being harassed by other kinds of spirits, and they were just drawing the energy from everyone in the room, and they showed up as this green glowing mass like a giant lava lamp, and I will never forget that one in my life. Wow. And I've never really heard of that phenomenon except back in the old days. I think a lot of people would come up with smokes and mirrors with this white stuff that looked like, it didn't belong there, and they called it ectoplasm. I'm sure a few times they were legit. I think a lot of times they were staged. Nonetheless, this was not staged.
So how did you, first of all, why did these spirits come to you? Did they know that you had the ability to help them get across?
They did, but I haven't yet. I didn't yet discover it. I was a newbie, but they knew.
So how did you get rid of these spirits?
Eventually, I knew to keep telling them, come into the room. I would say prayers. Certain things really came down to what I learned. I would scan a lot of books, I would just kind of look. I wouldn't necessarily read the whole thing, but I would accumulate things and kind of be led to what I needed. And things just made sense, like make a circle in your room, ask that everything inside it be, flow with the light of the Torah, the Buddha, the blood of Christ. And I would tell these people, why don't you try to just ask God to go and be rescued? And they would often leave. And I repeated that at the National Civil War Museum for Medicine, where 3 believing and 3 skeptical people watched about 30 or 40 soldiers appear out of nowhere and just start walking in an attic with a high ceiling in this staircase up into the light. And I have zero doubt that's what takes place when people are delayed. They really can be talked into and soothed and they now have the information. Just go into God's light. There's no punishment. You're fine. You're okay. Just go. You'll be with family and friends. They were coming to me because I guess I looked like the person from their viewpoint that had this big brightness around me and that I was going to be their helper. I was a scared father and a general contractor who just, as of 2 months before, finally ended my addiction to pain pills. And that was my big feat in life, is I finally kicked that, that habit of trying to take care of my back pain, and that they were seeing me as something entirely different. And it turns out they were right.
Fascinating, Richard. Really fascinating. We've got to take a commercial break very shortly, but how was it you discovered what your mission in life was?
I think it was a little bit between, not to drop names, Thelma Moss from UCLA, when she was retired, she used to run the School of Parapsychology. She was the first person I actually called, and she was made well known by one of her cases becoming a movie, The Entity, which was a little bit sensationalized, but not that much. Ed Warren was constantly defending me and boasting and going off with me alone on many of the cases. And the other was his introduction to Bishop McKenna, who to this day is somebody on this world I love as much as anyone I've ever loved, family or otherwise. This is truly a man of God.
All right, stand by, Richard. We've got to take our break here. Exonation, Richard P. Jackson is my guest, and Richard and I will be back on the other side of this news break as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. If you'd like to contact Richard, he's got a great website, www.richardpjackson.com. We'll be back on the other side of this commercial break as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. Richard P. Jackson is my guest this hour, www.richardpjackson.com. Richard, what are some of the scientific discoveries made recently accounting for proof of the continuation or the of life after death.
One of them is new, but I'm sure you're going to recognize it, and it's always overlooked by people. And what that is, because I want to start with this one, is there was a movie put out, maybe 8 or 9 years ago called 21 Grams.
Yes.
If a baby that's 3 pounds and 4 ounces is on a table and they, God forbid, pass on, accounting for their body fluids, they almost immediately weigh 21 grams less. If a 475-pound obese woman or man, same thing happens, they are 21 grams less. And it seemed to be, I believe, a couple years ago, and I'd be lying to tell you I remember which school, but I do remember it as MIT. Somebody was doing some experiment in the medical school, and they were taking pictures, and someone who was a patient happened to pass on. And in their passing on, they took a shot, and they watched some energy literally come out of their body. It looked like almost like a mirage you see on a hot highway in the summer,
yeah.
And it just kind of went through the ceiling and out and left. And it seemed to be the nature of the spirit.
Wow.
And do I have pictures of that happening? Yes, I have some that I keep promising I'll send. Now that I'm kind of back to normal, like, you'll get them. I have some very special ones because they're going to re-release the book Graveyard that a few of my pictures are in, and I mentioned that I'm going to send them some additional ones that were taken in the famous Easton Cemetery, and they basically show spirits leaving their grave, people who were stuck for some reason, and when I told them you can just go, it almost looks like a Disney picture of about 15 or 20 of them swirling out and headed up.
So how do you tell the difference between a good spirit and an evil spirit or a negative spirit if you're in a graveyard, for goodness sake? And why would it take so long for the spirit to leave the body in a graveyard?
I don't think they're spirits that were the spirits of the people there.
Oh.
I think that so many people schlep over there and sneak in at night that who knows what spirits they were and from where. But for whatever reason that they were there, I just had a feeling to say, if there's anyone here and you want to be with loved ones, you can go. I'm here to tell you. Just know my heart. Look at me. Go. Just go. And they did.
So tell me, in all the years you've been doing the work that you do, Rich, have you yourself ever felt that you have been in peril?
Constantly, yes.
So how do you protect yourself?
I can't really protect myself, but what I can do is thank and ask those far greater than me to please watch over my family and to drape me with the light of Torah, the blood of Christ, all things that are of goodness and light, that I may continue to do good things on this planet. And it seems to be okay. And I seem to be, most of the time, I have a phenomenal success rate, and every once in a while I get a slap to remind me to never take it for granted.
Can you share one of those experiences with us?
Yeah, and it's thank you, because about, I was maybe a month or two ago, I just decided to take the lid off of about half of the things I was holding back, waiting for me to write about or whatever. At this point now, the world needs to hear things and make their own decisions. I was in the middle of the day driving on Route 84 out of Hartford, Connecticut, and I was going to bless a area of a hospital where they were treating a lot of cancer, and there seemed to be a little activity. I don't think it was evil, but on my way there, a truck just pushed me off the highway into the guardrail.
Oh, no.
I spun around and stalled with 2 tractor-trailer trucks coming, screaming in my direction. They both went to either side of me. I turned the key. I thought I was dead, and I made it to the side of the road. The car was essentially totaled, and I looked. I could see 2 miles ahead, even though it was raining. It was a straightaway.
Yeah.
There was no truck. There was no orange truck. we're talking 7, 8 seconds later. I don't know what it is that pushed me and how it did it, but whatever it was, all I had to do was just know I was lucky. I didn't even want to know anything more, but I lucked out, and I was shaking like a leaf for about 20 minutes.
So who do you think that was in the truck that pushed you off? Or what was the truck that pushed you off? Was it a manifestation created by an evil entity in order to try and stop you from achieving your goal of going to this hospital and basically blessing it?
I think it may not have been the hospital. It's just that I was kind of tired that day. It was rainy.
Mm-hmm.
And just like on a rainy day, electricity can be more easily, like people can get into trouble when it's raining, when there's lightning. In that same way, lower energies work very similarly, which is why a lot of hauntings begin with noises either in between walls with wires and dampness or in bathrooms, because the day lends itself to having a lot of energy available, so that whatever this cyclical energy was, it sure as heck, it sure got to me. And what my job after that was simply to thank that happened, and thanks for whatever protection I got, and to give it no more attention. Not even to talk about it or write about it, because that would be giving it attention. And recognition is one of the main reasons that things appear or get stronger. If you take the words invitation and recognition, in some ways, spiritually, they are one and the same.
Halloween is coming up shortly, and Halloween, to many, is a celebration of evil. How does this affect the negative entities or the not-so-friendly spirits?
The actual holiday is only that because so many people want that. It's actually Hallowed Eve, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's All Souls Day the next day, and the next day is All Saints Day. And I believe it was back in Spain, they believe that evil spirits will try to stop the souls in purgatory from going to heaven. So what they did is they decided, amongst the church, that if people in fact wore scary masks, they may be able to in turn scare the other evil spirits away from molesting the people. And all of that turned into something entirely different.
Scary. Richard, what has been the hardest case you've ever worked on?
I would say any case that involves either a familial curse or an incubus attack.
Can you share one of each with us?
Sure can. Let me go with the incubus attack first. I always have wrestled with this one. I believe I have the only pictures that have been taken of an incubus. An incubus, for people out there, is a spirit that has no gender, but it is called an incubus because it basically physically will attack and rape women. And when it does it to men, it is called, appropriately enough, a succubus. And when the church or any church knows this is for real, they really try to back away from it because it's very hard to get rid of these things. I'm not convinced they're spirits. I'm not convinced they're anything, only that they do exist, and that they may in fact have something to do with intergalactic, interplanetary, or even thought forms. I believe in our own minds we can create our own monsters, and maybe somehow, collectively this happens. But I will never forget being with Ed and the state medical examiner of Connecticut, who is now gone, as is Ed, and we went on a case, and the woman we could not stop it whenever we tried to stop it, nor did we see anything, but she was being really violently shaken in ways the body can't move. At the end of it, she had a very large discharge of fluid. When Ed and the examiner told me a week later that under a microscope it resembled almost exactly the semen of a pig, I didn't sleep well for a few nights.
Wow.
And my pictures, any time, it's just that, by sending them to people, do they have any bad energy? They're 25 years old, but that's why I haven't put them on the internet. Why would I want more evil in the world?
Gotcha.
I'd rather people didn't believe it. But what happened, and on another case, which was similar, I'd been on maybe 5 with Incubus. It was a case of a lady who had 2 bad marriages, and they were really bad, not of her choosing. And she just had a couple drinks one night at a neighborhood bar. She's not a drunk or anything like that, very nice woman. And she just kind of rolled her eyes and said out loud, because we went and investigated, I just said, God, I just want a man to love me and to be in bed and to know that I have a partner. And that's all she said. And what she asked for, she got. But she got in a way she didn't want. And those are the pictures I have.
But if she asked God for this man, which makes sense if she's lonely and she's gone through 2 marriages, why would something negative happen when she's asking a positive force for a blessing?
I'm not sure she asked God or in the name of Jesus or in the name of, the Most High or Adonai. I think she just says, Jesus, I just want a man to come home to who'll love me. That's all I want. Nothing else. She said it that way, and she used to read tea leaves.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
And not that I think that's evil, but I think that opens doors.
I agree.
And I have during the interview, her friend from upstairs, she lived in an apartment building in East Haven, her friend who tried to help her, and she and Lorraine Warren, I have 3 shots of each of them. Each one, the entity is standing to their left. And in the last one of the 3, it turned 90 degrees in a rage. And it has broad shoulders, a pointed head, and almond eyes that were glowing red. And when I took pictures of where the bed, where the attack took place, it has this just eerie blackness that over half the picture that is obviously something spiritual. And after it was blessed, and I came back there, and I took a picture after doing a blessing, it looked like the whole bedroom was lit up like a fluorescent light bulb. Quite the opposite.
So if
there is something to this light and dark stuff, huh?
So if there is a God, if there are good forces in this existence that we have here on this planet, and I'm just playing the negative advocate here, all right? Mm-hmm. Why then is evil allowed to be part of our lives?
Part of our lives for the time being. When I have heard this, and I've asked, and I can't say that I got an answer I could swear to it. Mm-hmm. I would, but it's only my feeling.
Sure.
Is that up in this place called like heaven, which do I believe there's a heaven? Well, even if it's not called heaven, yeah, I think there's a better place we go. Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, at this point, yeah. I believe they don't even know what the heck we're talking about when we use the word demon. I think it's something that comes with the things that we have that are lessons in this physical world that come with things like lust and greed. And we all need lust because it makes us want to mate and have somebody, and we have our sexual desires. It's part of who we are. But then that same feeling can get very corrupted, and God has to allow that there's a force that if we choose that force has some power and repercussions. Otherwise, we would just be rocks or minerals. We have to eventually learn, and sometimes we learn the hard way. I am sure we're better than we were 5,000 or 10,000 years ago. As vicious as we can be, I bet you we're a lot better than we were 10,000 years ago.
So would you say that as a species, we're flawed?
Yes.
Now,
temporarily.
Here's my comeback to that. Because in the book of Genesis, it says, "And God said, let us create man in our image, our likeness. Therefore, if we are flawed, so is our Creator."
And perhaps that's in part true, that part of understanding the perfection is to understand being flawed. Like, we couldn't read print on a book if the book was black out to understand them that may go beyond even a lifetime. And the other thing is, and this is in no way disrespectful, especially because of the work I do, but in all truth, there's a saying in the Bible about how to treat your slaves.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't believe in slavery.
Yeah.
And what was okay back then may not be anymore. We've evolved. And some of the things like how to stone somebody to death
Mm-hmm.
for committing adultery, I've committed adultery, and I do not believe I'm a sinner. I've gone out with women 64 years old. I've loved people, and before we were married, have we been together? Yes. And I don't believe that I'm going anywhere but heaven.
But that's not adultery.
No. But it depends who you're speaking to. To you and I, it isn't, but to somebody else, it is.
All right, Richard, stand by. You and I have to take our final break for this hour. Exonation, Richard P. Jackson is our guest. His website, www.richardpjackson.com. And we'll be back on the other side of this break as we wrap up this hour here in the X Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. Exonation, Richard P. Jackson is our guest this hour. www.richardpjackson.com is his website. Rich, as always, great having you here on the show. Like I said at the beginning of the hour, I'm so happy to hear that you're feeling a lot better, my friend. That just means you're going to be working twice as hard, helping people get out of their spiritual dilemmas.
And health dilemmas, as we had a little exchange there, that sometimes color is one of the languages of the universe. If somebody we love is simply sick and we picture them for a split second with this beautiful cloud of pink, sometimes we might see it as pouring down from a heavenly place far away. Does that actually have any change physically? Yeah, we're getting more and more affirmation that thought does affect substance. And there's nothing wrong with putting the pink light of healing around people or putting the beautiful light of, brilliant white around people to just kind of give them that little added armor. We sure need it in the world right now.
We've got about 2.5 minutes left, Rich. What about fallen angels? Where do they fit into the entire spiritual world?
For the same reason that it's an imperfect world, fallen angels are only fallen because they chose to not appreciate the fact that human beings can have gender, can have sex, can have families, can meet in heaven, but even the mightiest angel has no gender and does not make love, and they felt it was like an affront to God. I think this is actually, a lot of this is more or less a biblical version if you really kind of look at it, but I believe that that's very true. And I think they're just, they have that will, and God gave them a will enough to be angry that these human beings, these upstarts, were given something they don't have.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So,
am I sure of that? As sure as I am of anything, I'm sure of that.
So are fallen angels what we call extraterrestrials?
Interesting subject. I think that anywhere between 0.1% and 100%, they overlap. I just don't know what the overlap is, but I believe sometimes they're one and the same. I don't know if it's all the time or rarely, but I'm sure at some point there's different, but I know there's a big chunk where they're one and the same.
So where would you put alien abductions?
I would put 98% in it's either spiritual, wishful thinking, schizophrenia, induced state. But there's still a lot that I believe have happened. Having worked with Dr. Mackey from Harvard, who is a skeptic, we went out, and it looked too much like some of these cases had too much validity. I think it might be people from our future. It might be time travelers.
That's an interesting concept. Richard, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. It's been a great pleasure. Let our listeners know how they can find out more about you.
They can find out more by going to my website. They're certainly welcome to shoot me an email. I am soon going to be having a blog that I think people will find very interesting. So I'm building up my repertoire, and I'm looking to have a show within a year with my very wonderful partner, Andrew, who's a psychotherapist, called The Psychic and the Psychotherapist. And we are going to do work on people's families with problems using both methods and coming together to help the family heal.
Richard Jackson, thank you so much for being with us. Take care of yourself, my friend.
Rob, you remain one of my most respected and loved people. Thank you. You take care.
I will, my friend. Exonation, Richard P. Jackson has been our guest this hour. www.richardpjackson.com. Now, I've got to take a commercial break with the news at the top of the hour, and I will be back at 6.5 minutes past the top as the X Zone continues with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada.